Today, I'm going to be going into all of the lore that Bloxburg added in the new Halloween update, so get ready because there is a lot to unpack. With the addition of the new haunted mansion over at Plenty of Pumpkins and Orchard came a ton of hidden story. Starting with the furniture, in the new update, Bloxburg added a new furniture set, and each item has quite an interesting description. I won't bore you with reading through every single item's description, but I will go over the basics of what they say. Starting with the statue here, the historic figure sculpture. All we know about this sculpture is that it moves its head and looks at you during the late hours of night and early hours of the morning. Whether the head is an actual canon part of the story of Bloxburg is unknown. Well, technically not unknown, but not confirmed. And that's where we'll run into most of our problems, is that in Bloxburg anything goes. So one thing can be considered part of the story and another thing just a feature or just an item. But for a few reasons I'll go over in just a minute, we're going to say this is part of the lore. According to the sculpture's description, this is a carving of a key historical figure. This could be two things, either one of the community managers or a Bloxburg character who we have not heard of yet. Unfortunately, there is no for sure way to tell at the moment, but let's go ahead and move on. Basically, if you go through all of the items descriptions, here's what you'll find. The mansion is owned or was owned by a man named Victor von Blox. Victor loved parties. He loved hosting them and having people over at his house. In fact, according to the table lamp's description, Victor aimed to maintain a warm, welcoming home in the community. We also know that Victor was an avid traveler. In other words, Victor loved to travel. Before settling in Bloxburg, Mr. Blox would travel the world collecting unique artifacts. As we can see in the fireplace's description, Victor loved sharing stories about the archaeological artifacts he found on all of his adventures. We also see that he was a captivating storyteller. And here's where these random details start to fall into place. If we read the desk description, we see something interesting. It says that the desk is perfect for writing a dramatic novel. Now, it doesn't say that Victor wrote any novels, but it definitely hints at it. From the looks of it, it wasn't just randomly perfect for writing a dramatic novel. I believe it was perfect for Victor to write a dramatic novel, and here's why. 1, we just learned that Victor was a captivating storyteller, which would aid him in writing a novel. 2, we learned that Victor went on many adventures and trips across the world, giving him all sorts of experiences and wisdoms to create a dramatic novel. And just the fact that of all things Bloxburg mentioned writing a dramatic novel makes me think he did. Which, quick update, Bloxburg just added 3 new items to build mode: a potion bottle, a spell book which we learned was written by Helen, and then a deciphering book written by Victor. That includes not only how to decipher code, but about ancient cultures and all of his adventures, proving my theory to be correct. But anyways, let's go ahead and move on to his connections. By reading the Victorian dining chair's description, we see that all of Victor's furniture was handcrafted by Simon. According to the sofa's description, Victor saved Simon when he was settling into Bloxburg. As a result, Simon and Victor became longtime friends. Simon ended up helping Victor build the mansion that he would live the rest of his life in. We also know that Victor was friends with Tom. As we see in the end table's description, Tom was fond of this end table. So when Tom became mayor of Bloxburg, Victor gifted him one. We also know that Victor is married to Helen von Blox, who was the previous owner of the mansion. I will talk more about her in a minute. Victor may also have some connection with Sabrina, because she is the one who tells us about the mansion when we start the quest. She also asks us to grab 2 books, the deciphering book and the spell book, which previously belonged to Victor and Helen. So the connection between her and Victor and Helen isn't crystal clear, but we do know that there probably is some connection. So now that we know Victor's connections and relationships, let's get back to talking about some of the new items. Starting with the dining table. This legendary table was used for parties and years of gossip and planning. As you can see, we're starting to get into more of the mysterious side of Victor, which I haven't really talked about yet. If we keep going back to the dining chair, we can see that Victor had many long dinners with important people. And keep these things in mind, I'll explain more about what this means in a minute. Thanks to the coffee table, we also know that Victor had a passion for coffee, specifically with a tiny bit of lemon in it. That has no significance at the moment, but just a fun detail. We also see that Victor and Tom had many heated discussions, and one extremely heated one that left a stain on the table. We also know that Victor used his desk for important business and for keeping secrets. Okay, that was a lot, but basically at the moment, all you need to know is that Victor was an important guy, he dealt with important people, and conducted important business. Now we're getting into some of the mysteries surrounding Victor, and then I'll break it all down and explain it. Because trust me, as much as this information may seem useless, it'll all make sense in the end. Let's talk about the armchair. In the description, it tells us that Victor liked to read about unique objects in strange places, connecting back to his love for archaeological artifacts and traveling the world. In fact, in one of the rooms upstairs, Victor has a Faberge or Fabergé egg, depending on where you live and how you pronounce it, but there's more to it. We also see that the armchair was perfect for researching the many mysteries of Bloxburg. So not only is Victor interested in archaeological artifacts and traveling, but he's also interested in mysteries. In fact, when you think about it, the reason he has a love for artifacts and traveling may be the mysteries behind him. And I'll come back to that in a few minutes. But anyways, let's get back to the items. Next we have the desk again, because if we keep reading the description, we see that since Victor's death, nobody's been able to open the drawers. Why could this be? Again, I'll tie it all together together in the end. Next we have the wall sconce, perfect for the winding halls of the mansion and when you need to run down a corridor from an unknown figure. Now this brings up a few questions. 1. Is the maze in the basement canon? And 2. What unknown figure is this talking about? I will come back to both of these questions in a minute. Lastly, we have the floor lamp, which talks about there being mysteries surrounding the mansion. Okay, so we've gone through all of the items and let me just recap us really quickly. So far we know that Victor von Blox was the previous owner of the mansion. Previous because we also know that he is now dead. He most likely wrote dramatic novels. Actually, we just got that confirmed pretty much. He did write a dramatic novel and was an important person. He met with many important people and had many important discussions. He was friends with Tom, the mayor of Bloxburg, and saved Simon the craftsman while settling into Bloxburg. What he saved him from, I'm not sure. I also forgot to mention that when Victor saved Simon, Bloxburg was not called Bloxburg yet. I know I've said this a lot already, but I will come back to that in a minute. Okay, let's move on to the quests and the lore there. Obviously, in the Bloxburg universe, potion making exists. It is a thing. As a part of the 7 quests, we made 5 potions. A potion of levitation, a potion of haunting, a potion of ghost vision, and a ghastly potion. When we mix those together, we got the phantom perception potion, which allows us to see ghosts. Another thing that exists in Bloxburg. We also have 2 books, a spell book and a deciphering book. The spell book was written by Helen and the deciphering book was written by Victor von Blox. By the way, I forgot to mention, Helen is also no longer alive as Sabrina tells us in the beginning. In fact, we learned that Helen haunts the mansion, that she is unable to leave this world. We also have pages to collect, pages that were missing from the books. What's interesting is that Sabrina knew where these pages were located. Whether or not that is canon is unknown. But we do know that Alan the fisherman fished up one from the river. The only way to fish a piece of paper up from the river was if the page was enchanted. With the phantom perception potion, we are able to see and talk to Helen, so before I continue with the final quest, let's talk more about Helen. She is the current, or if you've already completed the quest, was the owner of the mansion. She was married to Victor von Blox, and as I mentioned earlier, she is unable to leave this world, and that's because of deep guilt and regret. We learned through talking with Helen that she couldn't convince Victor that her death wasn't his fault. How she died brings up more lore I'll come back to in just a bit. In order to communicate with Victor, who has already died and moved on to the afterlife, Helen asked us to grab a keepsake. So we dig up a grave, probably Victor's. Why he was buried with a key in his hand, I'm not sure, but I'm guessing it was his grave because he was the last owner of the mansion, because obviously somebody couldn't live in the mansion if he had the only key. But anyways, Helen pops up out of the grave as a joke to try to scare us. But here's the interesting thing. She animated or moved the skeleton, meaning she can interact with objects. So why didn't she just pick up the locket herself? That's where things get icky, and I'm guessing that was just for the quest and for the fun, and that part of the story isn't canon, but we don't know for sure. But once we retrieve the key, we can use it to open the mansion, and then we find the keepsake and head to the fairy ring or ritual circle. Again, why do they have a ritual circle outside of the mansion? Hopefully you can start to put some of these pieces together in your mind if you don't already know. If you completed the quest and you've read through some of the dialogue, you may have already figured this out, but I will explain it all in just a few minutes. This is where things get crazy and quite a few of the mysteries are solved. So now Helen is able to talk with Victor and we get to see the whole conversation. If you remember how I mentioned Helen needed to convince Victor that her death wasn't her fault, well here's how she died. Helen passed away because of one of Victor's experiments. He had asked for her help with it. The reason it wasn't his fault is because she was more than happy to assist him. She was willing to take the risk. So once Helen was able to explain that and that it wasn't his fault for roping her into it, they both were able to go to the afterlife together, reunited. But here's where I can come back to everything I said I would explain later on. Here's where everything falls into place. As we learn through their conversation, the key to it all, Victor was a sorcerer, and so was Helen, which explains why Victor had a fascination for unique objects and strange places. It explains the moving statue, he probably enchanted it. Same with the books and the page. It explains the mysteries surrounding the mansion. It pretty much explains everything. When it comes to the underground maze, I'm not sure if it's canon. It is the way up to the 2nd floor, but I doubt Victor and Helen navigated through the maze just to get upstairs every day, so I'm guessing it's just a gameplay feature. There are a few things it doesn't explain, one of them being it doesn't clearly explain why he met with so many important people. My only guess could be the fact that he's friends with Tom, maybe had something to do with the rise of Bloxburg, since at this time Bloxburg was not the town of Bloxburg yet, and when some of these conversations took place, Tom wasn't the mayor of Bloxburg yet. So he could have helped to build the foundation of Bloxburg, helped assist Tom once he became mayor. That part we don't know, it's not clear, but we may discover it later on. Who or what is the mysterious figure one of those items talked about? Is it referencing Helen or something else? Why was Victor keeping these secrets? Why couldn't anyone open the drawers of the desk? How did Victor die? There's still a ton of questions to be answered, and I'm sure one day it will all make sense. Right now, Bloxburg is just opening a bunch of doors for so much more to come. I'm very excited to see what story comes next and to continue to unravel the history of Bloxburg. So next time Bloxburg adds some lore to the game, you can definitely count on me to cover it. If you enjoyed, thumbs up the video and consider subscribing. Have a great day.